I'll go ahead and call the Monday, September 15th, 2014 USD 489 Board of Education meeting to order. The first agenda item is approval of the agenda, and I will make a motion to amend the agenda under 9A, which is appointment of board clerk. I would amend that to say the administration recommends that the board approve Sarah Wassinger instead of Cheryl Schubert, effective Monday, September 22nd, pending personnel transactions or approval of transactions.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by myself, second by board member Bickle. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries 5-0. Next, we have audience participation. This is the first and only opportunity of the audience to address the Board of Education. No takers, huh? Okay, seeing no takers, we'll move on. One thing I want to add in here real quick, I see we've got somebody sitting in the audience back there, Elizabeth Yeager. As many of you know, it's been in the media here, we do have our board clerk stepping down, Miss Elizabeth Yeager. She has done a phenomenal job here over the course of the past months as the district has made many different changes and improvements, and we just wanted to publicly acknowledge your service to the Board of Education and to also the school district over your 7 years. Is that correct? 7.5 years. Yep. And wish you the best of luck. As everybody knows, she is moving on to Eagle Communications, so we wanted to take this opportunity to publicly thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have report of committees. Dean, do you want to take over?
Sure. Facility Needs Committee has worked on this project since long before I've been here. Yeah, somewhere beginning of time, but countless hours. We have Bryce Young and Patrick Lowry, the two co-chairs of the committee, here to do their presentation tonight on findings, recommendations, some of those, I don't know what word I should be using there, but I'll leave that up to you. I'll turn it over to you two gentlemen, and thanks for being here.
Okay. All right, thanks, Dean. Can everybody hear us okay? We're going to sit, if that's all right. We can scoot the microphone a little closer. Before we get started, we also want to recognize Brian Weimer was on the committee, as well as Nick Schween. And I think I saw Tom Drees come in right after that, so we appreciate all of their input as well.
And this is how long we met, just so you get an idea what we're dealing with here. This was my weekly carry-along.
Patrick brought that to every meeting. We did start meeting, I think it's in the presentation, in November of 2012. Wow, how time flies. Anyway, we're going to try to fly through this. We're going to attempt to summarize the process that the committee used, as well as how we ultimately came to the recommendations, and then at the latter part of the presentation, we'll obviously formalize that recommendation to the board. Our understanding, and anybody from the board can obviously step in, was that the board actually solicited the input of the Docking Institute, and they received a report in March of 2012, and the primary finding of that recommendation was to improve as well as potentially upgrade the facilities for numerous reasons. I think the board then solicited or retained the services of Charles Smith from HTK Architects, and that they charged to them was to review the facilities and kind of they set through the entire process, not only Charles but one of his counterparts, Zach Snethen, I believe, is how you pronounce his name. HDK developed multiple scenarios, one of which was just to repair the existing buildings as is. The second one was to repair and expand the facilities. And then I believe the one that made the media outlets was to close and consolidate, and the potential for building 2 mega schools, a brand new high school, and then move the middle school to the high school. And then I think that hit the paper with about $110 million price tag, if I'm correct. So the board decided that they might retain the services or attempt to bring on a cross-representation of community members, the list of which is up here. I think there were 9 of us, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 from the community. We felt like it was a good cross-representation. As Dean said, Patrick and myself were the co-chairs, and then we had a fair number a lot actually of board representation that sat with us through most of the meetings. The charge that we had from the board to the Facilities Needs Committee was to do a comprehensive short, medium, and long-range look at the needs, goals, enrollment, defining what the district should look like for the next 20 to 25 years. And I think that number moves. I think that might have actually been 30 to 50 years, but I didn't know if I was going to be alive in 50 years, so we just tried to look for the next 20 to 30. The process in and of itself was very enlightening for all of us, myself in particular, and I think Patrick would concur. One of the very first things that we did in the dead of winter was we actually went out to every single facility. I don't think we necessarily went to the bus barn, but we went to Munger, and we went to every single facility, and we were taken through what we considered to be virtually every square inch of all the respective facilities within the district. Not that we necessarily understood what we were hearing, but we looked at all the mechanical, electrical, and structural data. We reviewed the historical and future enrollment data, trying to understand, as you can well imagine, as committee members, we were constantly hearing, if the enrollment in the high school is actually down, why would you propose, or why would you even be in consideration to, any kind of surges in enrollment? So what we did was we actually looked, obviously, at the birth rates as well as the enrollment in the the elementaries, and tried to trend. And we can jump forward to that real quick. This is a slide that shows, and I apologize if you can't see it very well, but the last 2 bars, this is a look back to 2002, 2003, I believe, and that was total district enrollment with a high of 3151. The current year estimate is 2889, and you can see it actually jumps back up in the 2016-2017 school year. A further look at that by elementary, the top line is actually K through 5, with the last 3 being projected. The 14th, 15th is actually our best estimate of the enrollment for this current school year. The middle one is obviously the high school, and then the bottom one is the middle school. I'm going to go back to where we were. We mentioned that we met regularly from November of 2012 through March of 2014. We did make every effort to put a lot of onus on the respective schools to give us as much feedback and to do as much prioritization as they could for us, so that we felt like we had, in our opinion, adequate representation of the true needs of the respective schools. We then looked at numerous comparatives across the state, primarily in the 4A through 6A range, to see if the 489 district was, kind of on par, if you will, in terms of staying current, with the understanding and acknowledgement that, to the best of my knowledge, any bond issuance or anything that we do, we would be paying for at 100%, we being you, would be paying for it 100%, whereas there's some subsidization within, just say, other school districts. And then we looked at those options. Jumping ahead to what we actually found we wanted, and Patrick, chime in if you would, but the number one thing that we really learned as a committee was that none of us, I shouldn't say none of us, most of us didn't really understand the impact that special education actually had on, or adequate and or appropriate special education space had within each building and the constraints that it placed. And I just was speaking with Mark about this. The reality is, I think the district has, for a long period of time, tried to kind of put a square peg in a round hole in terms of finding space that is the most appropriate for not only the special education, but obviously if you take additional space for special education, it's got to come from somewhere. And the buildings, I know there's been some expansion in the middle school in the last couple of years, but the buildings weren't expanded at the same time, so it just left left less education space for the non-special education students. So if you look at a couple of the bullets there, this was interesting. Back in 1989, the special education students had, there were basically 371 within the district. That reached a high in 2008 of 726, and it looks like we had 675 in 2013. We don't apologize, we don't have a 2014 number. And I pulled this from one of Mark's slides, or we pulled this from one of Mark's slides. Only a high school was constructed after the federal special education law went into effect or became operational in 1976. So I hope that that's still accurate. I think I touched on the next one. Another common theme was that there's been a lot of deferred maintenance that's just put off, and it's just kind of a kick in the can down the road, and it ultimately, in our opinion, has caught up with us such that we're at a point where something has to be done, because it seemed to be chasing good money after bad if we reinvested in any of the existing infrastructures to a certain degree. I think they're still in good mechanical shape, or some of them, but we found that a lot of the, it's going to be difficult to find replacement parts for a lot of the mechanical equipment. And then another very consistent theme was the fact that there wasn't adequate storm shelters and or security access in most of the buildings.
And right about the time we were meeting was when the Sandy Hook shooting took place, and that just resonated home for us that it wasn't even all that isolated. And the law hasn't caught up with that yet to force every school district to do it, but that one's coming, I'm sure, from the federal law.
Other interesting findings were the growth in the industrial arts program, particularly obviously at the high school, and maybe not having adequate space to handle or absorb the increased demand. The middle school has obviously added 7th grade sports, which puts increased pressure on the gym space there. Very limited space for performing arts. Obviously, the 12th Street Auditorium right next to it. They found numerous structural concerns, if you will, both inside as well as outside the building. One of the things that we deliberated on, probably potentially the longest, was how to maximize the existing buildings, and one common theme that we really discussed probably the most were should we drop down to the two, or should we give consideration to the two mega schools, obviously for economies of scale and the potential for instructional efficiency. Maybe that made the most sense, but politically we felt like that would probably come with the most resistance, because in Hayes, I've been here for 14 years, there's no question people like their neighborhood schools. So we did ultimately, I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but after a lot of deliberation, we decided that maybe it did make the most sense, because maintaining a minimum number of sections in each and every elementary, that maybe it did make the most sense to repurpose Washington Elementary, drop down to the 4 elementaries, and as we looked forward with the footprint for the buildings, take the 2 properties that had the most space. So Lincoln, for instance, and O'Laughlin to some degree are space constrained from a footprint standpoint moving forward. So it probably made the most sense to expand at Wilson and Roosevelt just by the mere fact of how much physical space or how much land is available. And I mentioned that we wanted to establish multiple sections at each elementary school to maximize the instructional efficiency.
And we really did hear repeatedly, both from faculty and administrators, and anybody that was on the board 2 years ago, where it made sense to suggest going to the 2 mega schools. The instructional efficiency is just tremendous. I mean, we spent a lot of time arguing about whether we should be going on that path alone. But as Bryce said, we did consider the neighborhood school aspects, and so we took numerous votes on whether to go with 2, 3, 4, or 5 elementary schools, and it wasn't taken lightly.
Yeah. For those of you that don't have these slides, I apologize. By no means are we going to are we going to go through them about the next 8 slides, but what we did was the committee, through the administration, actually sent out a survey, if you will. I don't know if a survey is probably not the most appropriate word, but we wanted them to prioritize their top 5 needs and their top five wants. And we received that back, and I'll kind of fly through them real quick. It was interesting that at the high school, and the reason I'm pointing this out now because it obviously made the final cut, at least from our recommendation, but the number 1 need from the high school's perspective was for the fine arts and a performing arts auditorium.
And that was coming from, we demanded, when we asked for the input, that they engage all their stakeholders. So it was faculty, it was parents, it was site councils, it was administrators, and we had them explain how they gathered everything, and if anybody was left out, and I don't think anybody was left out.
No, and we had a couple of, I think Nick is on site council, and Tammy Welbrock, who's I don't believe here, but she's also was on a site council at the time of the meeting. So it was validated that input was in fact solicited. The middle school, just the top one, was the cafeteria, serving area, and kitchen, and then an additional gym and locker room. Lincoln was for secure front entrance and improved safety throughout the building. O'Laughlin was for a storm shelter. O'Laughlin has the second most dangerous storm rating for a USD 489 building, and this would provide gym space as well if it was multi-purpose. And once again, I apologize, but I'm just hitting the top one from each respective location. Roosevelt was for a new gym and a new cafeteria to include a new kitchen. And Washington was for more classrooms to accommodate smaller classroom sizes. Wilson, immediate needs, extra classroom space. This classroom is both an immediate and long-term need, as well as all grade levels, having the 3-section as you progress K through 5. We even went, as I mentioned early on, we went to the west side, we went to Munger, we went obviously to Rockwell. That's something that I didn't mention earlier, but to jump ahead, we did recommend, or the committee did recommend, the closure or the sunsetting of this building and the relocation of anything that is currently located here. And for obvious reasons, that really has to do with operational costs. So if we could recommend the construction of new, less expensive buildings that are more energy efficient and operationally efficient, then no sense just stay in this building at an exceptionally high operating costs. I touched on this earlier, but the 3 common themes were educational space. Obviously, that's the special education component, the safety and security, the lack of secure entrances and the lack of adequate storm shelters, and the deferred maintenance. And then we said it earlier, trying to set the district on course for the next 20 to 30 years. On the educational, this is somewhat reiterating what has already been said, but we have undersized auditoriums with inadequate staging areas. We mentioned the special education, difficult meeting PE requirements and having adequate gym space for activities, and limited space for industrial arts programs. Some of the solutions, to build a new 800-seat auditorium at the high school for district-wide use, expand special ed. I apologize for reading these because I don't typically read slides, but we're really getting into the meat and bones of the actual recommendations themselves. Expand special education classrooms at the middle school, Laughlin, Roosevelt, and Wilson. Build new gymnasium, storm shelters at the high school, a 2,000-seat competition gym, middle school, at the high school, middle school, Lincoln, Roosevelt, and Wilson, new cafeteria to Laughlin, expand industrial arts program at the high school and bring together modern technologies, and recover general classroom space previously used by special education and pre-K services. On the safety and security side of things, most of the current buildings lack securable entrances. You can see a picture, I believe, of what is Hayes Middle School, and there's obviously a little line of sight if you're sitting in the office, so somebody could come in, and basically not be seen right off the bat. Front offices have limited visibility, which is what I just said, and all facilities lack adequate storm shelters, and there are accessibility issues throughout the entire district. The recommendations or solutions: develop obviously secure main entrances each facility, improve the door access control and security cameras, ensure each facility has a designated storm shelter adequately sized, and ensure all facilities meet ADA requirements. On the deferred maintenance side of things, buildings have been maintained, but funds available through capital outlay have often fallen short. Aging mechanical systems that are at or nearing the end of life, and aging facilities in need of interior and exterior repair to prolong life and prevent total failure. Obviously, there's a couple of exterior shots there that aren't ultimately very visible, but I think all of you know where they are. Some of the solutions: replace mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems that have reached their life expectancy, repair and replace failing exterior windows and doors, repair masonry, and replace damaged and worn out interior and finishes. Operational costs: much of the equipment is at or nearing its operational life, which has been stated previously. They're having difficulty finding parts. Newer mechanical systems will obviously have increased or better operating efficiency. The repair of existing buildings will lessen the need for ongoing maintenance. Newer buildings constructed with durable, low-maintenance materials, and it frees up capital outlay monies for other purposes. I think now we have, Chuck, are you going to come up and do the concept plans? What we did was I want to definitely acknowledge HDK because they set in, and I can slide over if you want, they set in virtually every meeting, and then they came and provide us with just rough renderings. I mean, these are 30,000 foot view renderings of the space requirements, and so I think Chuck's going to walk through some of those.
And pretty much every time that we changed our mind or had a different vote on something, we re-engaged them, so we kept you guys busy.
Yeah, you did. That's okay.
This is out of forward.
I think it's important that, and I think that the work of the committee has been absolutely priceless. And their engagement with us has been very good, and something that every district needs to go through at some point in the process anyway, so the timing was probably good, and I think it was enlightening for everybody. I'm going to try to bounce through these pretty quickly. I think the big thing to think about as we start through these is the notion that of some of the buildings like Rockwell that would no longer exist in this particular concept. Doing something really good for special education, which then frees up existing classroom space that had been taken for special education. So, and I think the one other thing to remember as we kind of go through these is some of these plans really bulked up as we went through this process. As Pat talked about, well, wow, that's bigger than we thought it was going to be, or that's more than we, is there another way? And what really made the process really work was that they went back through not just the architects, but went back to the administration and said, okay, let's take a gut check on this and let's really talk about what we could do inside this building if we had the right spaces in the right places, or if we could regain space that had been previously taken for another purpose. So we really kind of kept that circling back until we really efficiently, I think, found an efficient way to use space in the building given a particular plan. Again, these are at 30,000 feet. We don't have everything worked out, but the idea was really to show a way that this might work. and they got a long ways to go if the direction that you finalize, you decide to go with. I think we have a long ways to go to get to the right plan and answer all the questions, but again, kind of the big idea. So this is the high school site here. The high school site does a couple things. Rockwell this entire campus would basically no longer exist, and a new maintenance and office facility would go on this site, which is the blue and the tan at the upper part of the plan. There would be on your northeast parking lot off of that. The idea would be obviously to right size administration, to right size those functions versus how much space that's used here, and do it in a more efficient and more cost-effective space to operate. At the high school itself, we spent a lot of time really trying to get things right there. At one time, we had 4 or 5 actually, classrooms added onto the northwest end of the building. That's been pulled back. Did some expansion in industrial arts. That was really key there, and it's key to know that it's not just shop space and classroom space, but it's really integrating technology and integrating those spaces from the classroom to the industrial arts program versus kind of the traditional idea of industrial arts. So doing that, improving the other arts in the building in that kind of southeast existing complex or addition to the building. So repurposing that area there with an industrial arts expansion onto the northeast side of that building. Again, remembering that we've taken special education and repurposed how that might happen in this building. We've added it's hard. We've added an auditorium, which would be, can I get up?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to
Point it out.
So an auditorium would be added here, the existing office space, proposed to go out in front of the existing gym, so we have that secure entrance. We end up with a common space or a new lobby space for the building. So when you came in, you'd have to check in, go through the office, you'd end up in the lobby of the building, which also be your pre-function space, so you have an auditorium space. The additional, or the existing office space that was the advantage would be repurposed for classroom space. We've also then added a competition gym out on the face of the existing competition gym. We have an entrance there with expanded common space. Also, the office complex will bridge the entrance between those two common spaces, so you have securability on both entrances, depending on how you are using or allowing the public to come into those spaces throughout the day or evening, so you can secure it from happening.
Can I ask a question as we go, or you want me to wait?
Sure.
So would we keep the 2 existing gyms?
Correct, here?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And what is a competition gym? What does that mean? It's just bigger or bigger? Okay.
Well, Marty, you want to speak to that in terms of the minimum requirements to be able to host a sub-state?
Our gym is, especially with the addition of the new bleachers, we lost because of the handicap seating, we lost a couple hundred seats, and
Okay.
our gym is below the recommended size by Acacia, so hosting a sub-state or a large basketball tournament, it's just not possible.
Okay. Okay.
So at the middle school side, I'll try to speak up. At the middle school side, again, special education, a couple things. The secure entrance was a big deal. Special education is a big deal. Cafeteria space, very, very small. Kitchen, very, very small. Needing additional, came up in an additional gym with the expansion of athletics in the middle school. So I'm trying to really figure out a way that makes some sense to do this and get it right. So really what we've done is taking special education and remodeling, basically the library going out, bringing the entrance out to the outside of the building and creating a special entrance there. Got an entrance in here, we've expanded the kitchen cafeteria space in here and the kitchen space back. We're expanding that, it's a commons space there. Adding on to the athletic practice gyms and locker rooms that are associated with it and also rooms. And the media center would come out forward on the building as well.
So where's the main entrance
I
then?
believe we relocated the main entrance to behind that. And everything myself back here.
I think it says office there, doesn't it?
So it's off the west side?
Where the parking lot is?
Correct.
Okay.
Great, the next one, Chuck.
Yeah. So at Lincoln, this one morphed and had 4 additional classrooms added to it, and we came back down there, we worked our way through sections, and available site for those things, the kind of big thing here to do is a secure entrance right now, you have to go completely into the building, we're in the main corridor and back around to get into that, and so really rethinking about how you sequence of how people can get into the building, especially in the classroom or during the school day. Again, all these ideas are, of course, come through us here directly into the office, and then back into the building was getting all those different checks, camera, security electronics, and all that. Cafeterias in the basement, accessibility is a big issue on this particular site. It's the story of the cafeteria in the basement. How do we resolve that? So the idea was to come up, build a right-sized gymnasium, from the gymnasium, repurpose the existing multi-purpose space, cafeteria space, still put an elevator in to access the second level, but go ahead and get it to the third level so that we have access to the lower level for storage shelters. Most likely we would, if we had to include a constant amount of main level.
And this isn't a cropping error within the presentation, because Pat and I were saying, why don't you make this bigger? And Chuck told us the reason that they did this is that this gives you an idea of the actual acreage that the facility sets on compared to the other buildings.
Each plan.
We fought hard.
Yeah, we lost.
So as you look at each plan, it's proportionately correct with the rest of the building. And the size.
Chuck, Lincoln, the gymnasium, would that not be FEMA rated then, since you're putting the storm shelter?
No, I'd say we would have space on this level that we would FEMA rate as well, whether it's the gym or the expansion of the gym.
Any changes to the parking?
We also recommended that on the north side, that if I'm remembering right, Chuck, didn't we consider moving the fence so that we've got a whole drop-off area
Yep.
there as opposed to right there on Ash?
Street, okay.
This is a Laughlin again, freeing up existing space, secure entrance, again, you got to come into the building and then into the office. Repurposing the entrance area so we have a secure entrance, taking special ed and putting it on it as an addition on the northeast corner. That to free up and better use the space inside the building. And then I'm really looking at the cafeteria, existing cafeteria space, too small, not enough kitchen space. How can we start to work with that? So what we propose is coming out with the cafeteria, new cafeteria kitchen space, and repurposing the existing cafeteria for right size using that space. So again, we can build storm shelters in a number of these additions. Roosevelt, as you can see, again, the building scale is the same, so the site is 10 times the site size of the building. So Roosevelt would be the largest, probably the largest of the schools, elementary schools in the district. We've built a number of sections here. In this particular one, there's already special ed here, so instead of expanding the entire special ed in a different location, we felt like the space we could do now that we can add on to that and give the additional space we need for special ed at that location. Add on classroom space on the north end for general classrooms, and then add a right size the gymnasium here, and right size the cafeteria and kitchen. Music here already, so that they were appropriate for that size of the building. Roosevelt's one of the sites that has basically, all the buildings have some different, a lot of deferred maintenance issues, they all kind of jump around. Roosevelt has, I think you got talked about chillers already here. There's a number of aging mechanical systems here, including sanitary sewer lines, so a lot of work in tunnels.
Can you explain a couple of numbers, Chuck or Bryce, here, where it says year built and then it has capacity and student population? It says capacity 360, but we currently have 445 in the building, is that right?
That's correct. We've got another slide with balance on that, the numbers may be more updated than that. So I need to get back this slide. I'm not sure we got this slide over here. Those numbers. And then we would need to do some work with expanded parking and service drives along the south end there. Wilson is a difficult client to work with, but have fun to site. So one of the probably the big concept that really involved at Wilson was not only to shore up special education needs at the site, but also bring early childhood to the site and cycle that out of the other buildings to free up and maximize space, classroom space there. So special ed, orange and early childhood and pink. The pink utilizes a portion of and renovates a portion of the existing wing and expands it. That comes off to the northeast there. And also, we really worked a long time with trying to figure out a better way to add on to this building with the existing Brown library there. We just kept having lots of unusable space, trying to connect additions around this thing. So after we fought that for a while, we started really kind of crunching some numbers, trying to figure out whether or not it would work to just go ahead and demolish the library and put it somewhere else so we can build a more efficient plan and more cost effectively. It worked out better, not only number-wise, but also worked out how the building would flow and function inside the building. Secure entrances, as you know, we're all the way back basically into the heart of the building to get the office space, so bringing the office space out to the right, come in as well. The gymnasium now just gets used for the cafeteria for the most part, if I remember right, and then the new gymnasium out here. Some classroom spaces are expanded on the back here, nice little storage room that's happened to be right between the classrooms, line up with the corridor from the last expansion, to make that a pretty cost-effective place to add on. So what that means would be, you really come into the building and have to sit in the core portion of the building, which kind of special there. For activities that way. And then adding parking for early childhood, special education, and special education drop-off in the site. And then Washington. Washington, a lot of conversation about Washington. And again, with the notion behind the notion that this entire complex here is like no longer function, then we need a complex for the west side and some of those other educational services that happen here. So, with the limitation with being in a FEMA floodplain on how much money you can reinvest into a facility, we were limited to how much we could spend money, or even maybe be willing to spend money at Wilson. So what we did is we tried to bring the west side to the education programs to this side, renovating the main level only and including those others, not going to the expense to renovate the second level or the elevator. And primarily that's because if we try to do that, we would exceed the amount allowed by FEMA to spend on structure without bringing the whole building up to the compliance, which would be pretty hard to do unless somebody knows how to do it.
Can you use it for storage? I mean,
Sure. So
you can use it for things, just not students and.
And you can use it for students. The big thing is based on its valuation, FEMA requires that you minimize how much you invest in the facility without bringing them all the way up to current operating standards. So basically, if we try to go above the second floor, we would exceed that number in terms of dollar value, which is good. So west side, help me out here, west side, the learning center are the two primary things here. And again, utilizing the current south entrance, we're able to kind of segregate what's kind of two faces of how that building is being used. And so, getting back to the question you had here, these are probably a little more number. Basically, we're trying to do some comparisons and through this whole process, trying to keep it where everybody could understand all the numbers. And so we started looking at each of the buildings through the process, and we ended up setting up these three columns here, which is student capacity, current student capacity. And those are based on every space you have in the building based on educational standards. For classroom sizes, and we've made through a number of assumptions that the district uses on their class size ratios, student-to-teacher ratio. And then this particular column here is the proposed student capacity, so that's what happens to the buildings after you do a plan similar to this. And then this column over here is the column that shows your capacity 2015. And then broke it down again, just another way to study it that the committee was looking at is how much we spend on systems, how much we spend on existing buildings, how much we proposing spending on additions and renovations of existing facilities, and what those totals will be here. And then escalating those forward, knowing that we're estimating today's dollars, no dollars, but we know that we're not building today, what that might be in the future, so bringing those down. This is a total that the plan similar to what we're talking about tonight would look like, kind of a gut check. Everybody's like, well, holy cow, that's a lot of money, so what if you just replace everything in the district, what does that number look like? And the far column here represents a gut check. Okay, well, if we have to replace every one of these buildings in the district with a new building, the appropriate right size building, how much of that costs, and that's the appropriate right size. That's a pretty substantial number. Kind of helps reinforce the fact that these existing buildings and renovate and expand existing building stock and repurpose what you have and make that work. And that's can be cost efficient. So that kind of summarizes the previous sheet here. The plan that's came out of the committee at $96.9 million. Some estimates on the new printer and equipment might cost, and estimates on technology, what a bond issue might look like. So around the bond issue number, assuming the bond issue, I'm pretty sure that would be a hard number to find without bond issues. As it would for any years. This isn't my area of expertise. We use Weston Ivy, financial consultant, to do this for the district. That basically taking a look at what that number might look like over 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, what that might cost might be. So, $150,000 building for ranging from $360 to $30 million.
Next. Did you say next? Okay, sorry.
And that's, you know, summarizing 20 years at the top, 30 years at the bottom. That's our amount for the 30 years.
Okay, so we left it to Chuck to throw the big number at you. We truly entered the process not believing the high figure that had been come up with. And then we came pretty darn close to it ourselves. So there's just too many mechanical things that need to be replaced. We decided that since the charge was set the district up for the next 20, 30 years, we wanted to include all of the basics that needed to be without going into the extravagant, or we didn't think so. And even with our deliberation, it wasn't a unanimous vote. So we struggled with it quite a bit. And if any of those numbers aren't quite correct on the elementary by building, we'll get those correct. Did those look right, Dean?
Pretty close. Some
Are
include,
we over capacity in each of the elementaries?
no, I think that's accurate, isn't it, Lee, on your numbers? That includes preschool numbers?
Yes.
And I'm trying to think, what was the other one? O'Laughlin is over, but yeah.
Okay, okay. So our work has come to an end, at least in this incarnation, and we're going to put it back into your hands. As Chuck said, there's probably not $100 million sitting around in reserves. So the obvious thing would be to go with a bond issue. We know that you've engaged Docking Institute before. We had met with them during our discussions and deliberations. They would be available to predict what would be passable in the community. Last year, they were pretty on the money with the LS 388 bond issue as far as what would pass there. So that would probably be at least something worth considering. If you're going to run a bond issue, if you wanted to get very aggressive with your timing, probably the next time to do it, if you didn't want to do a special election, would be in April of 2015, when there's a school board election anyways. Determining what type of election you would like, of course, is up to you. Special ones cost a little bit more, probably don't have as good a turnout, so that's all to be factored in. The educational campaign would have to be massive. I think if you could get everybody in the community to go through the same 2-year process that we did, everybody would walk away saying that obviously needs to be done. I truly believe that. None of us walked in thinking that there was possibly that much that needed to be fixed or planned for. And we walked away discovering it was a $100 million recommendation. If you get a bond passed, it would take, using HDK, probably take about 30 months for everything to be completed, start to finish, which is why in the financing, you can stagger when the bonds are issued to reduce your cost a little bit. There's no point in borrowing it all up front. Is now the right time? Who knows? The last new building we did here in the district was in 1979 with the high school. That originally was going to call for a large auditorium and a larger gym, as we've got in this plan. They were nixed, but the needs are still there. There's not one facility in the entire district that everybody can go into at the same time. And that's why we use Fort Hayes for graduations, and it's just a seating capacity issue. The last bond issue that the district did was in 1995 for maintenance items, so it's even been a while since we've done any major maintenance. It's just been deferred, and it's catching up to us now. We've got steady student growth, particularly at the elementary level. And the increased space requirements, as was mentioned numerous times with the special education population, is causing larger classroom sizes to be needed. Construction costs currently low. I guess that's a standard to say the longer you wait, the more expensive it becomes. That there's nothing unique about that right now, because there's always going to be cost escalation as you draw it out. We do believe this plan would put the district on course solidly for the next 20 to 30 years and beyond. And the thing here with the uncertain future for state funding to school districts, it's very real. You guys are feeling that already this year, and who knows what even will happen come January. So the more money that you can free up with the operational budget by not having to dedicate it to Band-Aids of significant size probably is going to make life easier for everybody. So that's our report. We'll take any questions you
Got
have.
a couple additional things.
Oh, yeah.
Number one, I think we were remiss in recognizing Elizabeth for all the work that she did for not only the committee, but in particular for Pat and myself, because as co-chairs, there is no chance that we could have pulled it off, what little we did anyway, without Elizabeth's help. So we're deeply indebted for what you did for us. Obviously, this committee was initially going to make the recommendation or this presentation in March, and we ended up not doing so. And this is probably not news to anybody, but from the medical center's perspective, I think the district has to stay at the same pace as the hospital and the university. We can't fall behind, because the reason that Hayes Med and/or the university and probably every employer here is able to, or we are able to recruit people, first and foremost, is typically the school district, because we can take care of people at the hospital and we can take care of people that want to work there. That's not the issue. So the school district cannot fall behind. I'm sure Fort Hays would tell you the exact same thing. And once again, this is probably not news, but there were elections, I believe, in Salina, Topeka, Liberal, and Garden City, all of which were over $100 million bond issues, or elections, if you will, in the April election, all of which passed. The minimum numbers that I have is with a 60% approval rating. I acknowledged earlier that some of that funding comes from the state, so 100 million isn't 100 million, but we can't afford to put this off. And so, like Pat said, the committee was by no means in agreement. There was by no means unanimous on anything. There was far from dissension, but there was a fair amount of discussion. But I was talking to Pat earlier. I'm confident, after doing a lot of work on this presentation, Pat and I and Dean and Chuck over the last 2 weeks, that what we recommended was the most appropriate recommendation from the committee to the board. So we're very comfortable with this presentation.
I know that I speak for everyone on the board, the administration, parents of current students and future students when I say thank you for the last 2 years' worth of work, the time and effort that everyone put into this. It was necessary, it was essential, it was important, but I know it was a lot of work, so thank you.
Absolutely.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you, guys.
I'm looking forward to literally taking that weight off my shoulders.
So who does that go to now? Is that ours?
Board
If
president.
you'd like it, absolutely.
One question I had on Hayes High, the number one item that was needed that kept coming up was a performing arts center.
Right.
Now, Hayes High has a capacity of 1,200. Why the 800 number? What's the reason for that? Maybe that's a question for Chuck.
Chuck and/or Marty.
We find that traditionally, we find that most school districts don't try to build for capacity in their auditoriums. They don't use the auditoriums for assembly. They use the gymnasiums for assembly. And they build the right size of the auditorium. It is pretty specialized space. It's a very expensive type of space to build. So trying to right size those for sell out capacity, but at the same time not undersize it. So it's been we went through a lot of different versions of that. Even the largest school districts that we do work for in Kansas City do not build 1,200 seat auditoriums. They're like 800, 900 at the most. So that's primarily the reason.
Jay, I don't have anything to add other than when I talked to Chuck about that and wondering about the Wilson James, and I think the term you used was cavernous. Is that correct? I think that's a word. But when I went up around the Washington DC area, Prince William County District, I looked at their newest schools. We're talking about 2,500 student high school with 600 seat auditoriums. Garden City, 600 seat. Dodge City, about 900. Derby High School, about 900. Goddard, about 900. So I would say that what he told me seemed to be the fact in many schools that are far larger than we will be in the next 2 decades.
What I would suggest then, and I appreciate all the time that these guys put in, it was countless hours, but at the work session, we'll start having this conversation, we'll keep gathering information and probably have Chuck come and visit at that point. Also, Dustin, Avey, the finance person, and kind of talk about that so you have a pretty good grasp of what we're talking about, and then develop a plan, find out when we want to look at a bond issue, whether it's this spring or later, whatever the plan is, but come up with committees, if we're going to do a survey, and just start that process. But at every work session now, we'll start at the next one, we'll dedicate time to developing a plan to do this, and we may have to meet sometime just to get into this alone, because it's a daunting task, obviously, to come up with a plan, so.
Okay. I got one more question for you, Chuck, before you head out.
Okay.
The bond issue in 1995, if I understand correctly, that was mostly for air conditioning, right? And some minor upgrades, it was not a big one? Does anybody know in the,
Paint repairs.
it was just a lot of little repairs?
Yeah, paint repair. Let's see if the brochure had a little paint bucket with the brush.
Okay,
Just paint repair.
so basically, a lot of our buildings have never had any major overhauls then?
We had 5 additional classrooms in the academic part of the building, plus the ag area, with the greenhouse added in 1995, as well as the lunchroom.
Okay, but basically, so once the buildings have been built, or they were built back in the 60s, 70s, they've never really seen what would be called an overhaul. Would that be a correct statement?
Actually,
An overhaul, I would agree with that. They have seen some expansions here and there.
some of them, Lincoln, for example, has had significant overhauls to it over the years. And there was, I don't know if it was the committee that got that, I think they did, but I think the board got it quite a while back too, that went through every building and every set of improvements that occurred to that building from the day of its first being placed into use. But it's been a long time.
Right.
Yeah, there, and if you can't find it, Dean, let me know, but there is a report that covers each building and when it was originally built, and every time it was either touched or major touch, either major expansion or renovation. So it has years, but I would agree that generally they haven't been, in terms of systems, touched significantly for a long, long time.
So would you say, in your expert opinion, along with the facilities committee, who spent 2 years, that we're kind of reaching the point of no return on the buildings, to where if we don't do something, we're going to fall apart?
There are plenty of parts and pieces that are no longer available, that your staff has done a marvelous job of I think everything from Google, everywhere, or eBay, everywhere else to find parts, breakers for some of the electrical panels. I mean, they've done a great job of retrofitting old boilers with better performing boiler systems, but still in the old big vessels, and they're pretty inefficient.
Anybody else got any questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lowry.
Thank
Mr. Young.
you, guys.
Thanks.
Brian.
Good luck.
Nick. Tom's back there, Chuck, and I thought I saw somebody else squeak in that was on the committee. Nope. Okay, thank you, guys. Okay, up next, we have communications from other organizations.
You have attached the Hayes Rec Commission minutes and their agenda those were the only communications from other organizations we have at this time.
Okay. Report of superintendent.
I have a couple things here. The first is Adams, Barron, and Ball are doing an audit, and when we went through this last year, the board had requested to sit down, like 3 board members and go through this. Cheryl's going to have to help me, but they are doing an audit right now, and what we want to know is if you want to sit down and go through this with them, 3 board members, or more of you can go 3 at one time. But, and Cheryl, you can explain a little bit more what.
They were open to scheduling an office time for 3 of you to go in, or 3 individuals separately, or they would set aside time while they're here for their full visit, October 6th through the 10th, for you to come to this building. To have any questions. We started this procedure last year, where, I believe it was last year, maybe Greg knows exactly when it started, but
My understanding, we've done it every year since I've been on the board,
Oh.
but last year was the first year I ever heard that it occurred in
Okay.
10 years, so 11. But I would encourage everybody, I think we need to do it. I think it's only reasonable to set 2 or 3 appointments and, make sure to schedule, coordinate through Dean or somebody who's going to be there so you don't show up with more than 3. But, I mean, you could do it here and just notice it. You can notice all 3 of them. It wouldn't matter how many you have.
Who is interested in, who wants to participate in that? Does everyone want to do it? That'll determine how we do this, but.
Depending on the date, I would.
Yeah, Greg, so get a list of dates.
And Cheryl, did they talk about a couple different times? If we had,
they just said you would have to call the office to schedule an appointment, or set aside any of the time they're here. They're here all day, every day, October 6th to the 10th.
okay, I will coordinate that and see about, check with the other 2 board members and see if they're interested, but schedule something where there's no more than 3 and however that fits into the schedule.
Seeing that week would be the ideal.
Mhm. Yeah, it would, so.
I won't be able to do it that week, but.
Okay,
I
well,
was just
I'll
there,
check.
So
Okay.
don't not set it then because of me.
Okay, and what were the dates, Cheryl? October
6th through to the
6
10th.
through 10? Okay. We will do that. The next thing is the homecoming parade, October 3rd. We will have a Suburban, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Lance, Sarah, and James had talked about, is that correct,
Right.
James? Walking, and if it rains, we have the Suburban, I guess, but anybody else interested in participating in that? Do what?
I've got the same conflict then as I do that.
Okay. But we will, I'll get the information out where we'll meet and those things before, and we'll just do the parade as superintendent and board members, so, okay. And I have you 3 right now. The next thing is Hayes Middle School Band went to Hutch and received a #1 rating. That was September 10th, which is a superior rating, and just wanted to congratulate those kids and their director, Marcus Bishop, and assistant Craig Monteith. So, great job for those kids, and they'll continue to excel, I'm sure. Just another little note, tomorrow morning, we will close on the 33rd Street property, so that'll be taken care of, but we'll do that tomorrow morning. So, that's all I have.
Okay, on to the financial support. Tracy, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. The first one is our 5-year projection, broke down by the 8 main categories we look at. Just a couple of items on the chart that look a little drastic. The green purchase property services, there's a jump in 2014, and then it comes back down in 2015. That is for the addition at the middle school. The orange is the property line, and that drops down in fiscal year 15 because of our computer lease dropping off. And then the 800 debt services and miscellaneous, the light blue, that is increasing this year due to us paying off the no-fund warrant. So, but those are the numbers from fiscal year 11 through what we have budgeted this year. Are there any questions on that? Okay.
I guess I do.
Yes.
I mean, this is one of the things we've been asking for, and I guess that getting the historical now allows us to take the next step and get the future projections. How far out do you think we'll go on that?
I don't think it'll take us too terribly long to look at the next couple of years, based on just guesstimates, of course, on what school funding is going to do, but.
Well, right, obviously, we
You're
don't
talking
know what
expenditures,
peak is
so-
going to do. We know
Salaries.
generally if we stay flat with state funding where our historic increases, then we should be able to, I just think for labor negotiations, future purchases, the bond issue, our ability to service and maintain that if we would pass a bond, how can we maintain it, or can we, where 20 years from now, we're not asking to fix up everything that we deferred the maintenance on. So,
Okay. I will work on that.
by we, we'll always still, you never know. So. The only other question I have is, well, I guess never mind, it's all listed there. I was looking at just the salary benefits line. Oh, are we going to be looking as well at having something similar to that for each building? Do we already have that? I missed it.
I have not broke it down per building, but I can do that.
It would just be helpful to see. I guess it may not be as important for the historical, but it might be just for purposes of planning and the changeover to.
You're talking about the chart.
Well, not really the chart, but it's, you go down and we look at the expenditures per building, and then figure out kind of where you've been and project out where you go as well.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay.
And this is all new numbers based off the new system, is that correct?
Yes, this is out of Valley Intelligence, yes. It is very user-friendly in that regard, so I'm really enjoying it.
Good.
And then the monthly report is for showing numbers from August. There aren't any concerns. We are well within budget at this point. We've expended a little over 8.5% of the general fund, a little over 5% of supplemental general, and 9% of all funds. The teacher salaries start in September and go through August, so we do not have any teacher salaries out of this yet, so that's why it's under, the 2/12 of the year. We'll see that jump up a little bit now since we'll be paying them for the month of September. And then we'll catch that up at the end of the fiscal year. But that's why we're only at 9%, is a lot of that because of the salaries that aren't coming out for these couple months. We did have our work comp audit for last year. They go through and look at our actual salaries, and we will be receiving a little over $13,000 in our premium refund for this year. So that was good news. And then I also created this chart that was asked for, just a breakdown of our salary and benefits. I broke it down for certified, non-certified, and then the different benefits for medical insurance, life insurance, Social Security, and those types of items.
So this is total district?
Yes, it is.
Okay. But, okay, so this would not include, if this was for August, this would not include the teachers?
This is annually, this is the
Oh, this is
entire
annual,
amount.
okay.
Yep, mhm.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, this is the
okay.
amount we have
Okay.
budgeted for this year.
Okay. This is good. I mean, I requested this because I wanted to better understand our largest category as we go into negotiation discussions and really look at where our largest expenses are and if there's any work we can do to try to decrease some of that cost on life and, not on the medical insurance specifically.
That is all I have unless there are other questions.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions for Tracy?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda and ask for approval of the consent agenda, which would include the work session minutes from August 11th, 2014, board meeting minutes from August 18th, work session minutes from September 8th, the financial reports, which includes the August clerk's report, August investment reports, August expenditure reports, the petty cash report, the approval of Connections SF 425, which would authorize the board president to sign the document. We have the approval of surplus property items, which includes disposal of the scoreboards, a sale to FHSU of the foundry equipment, approval of bills in the amount of $3,106,889.77, and personnel transactions. Do I hear a motion?
I move that we approve the consent agenda, items A through H, as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Board Member Rankin, second by Board Member Lang. Any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. Okay, on to new business 9A, appointment of the board clerk. And as you remember, we did amend that, so it should read now that the administration recommends that the board approve Sarah Rossinger, board clerk, effective Monday, September 22nd. Dean, do you want to give a little background information on that?
Sarah's actually in the audience tonight, if you want to wave or stand up, and appreciate her coming. She accepted, and we just hired her and appointed her, or will appoint her as board clerk. She attended elementary schools, correct me if I'm wrong, elementary schools at Roosevelt, and then went to TMP High School and Fort Hays State University. She is currently the manager at Radio Shack, and we are excited to have her. She's going to be a good addition, and can't wait for her to start next Monday already, so good deal.
Welcome.
Welcome, Sarah. Okay. Is there a motion on the table?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Board Member Lang,
Second?
second by Board Member Rankin. Any questions, comments? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. Up next, we have appointment of homeless coordinator.
What I'm asking is, Elizabeth was the coordinator for homeless, and we need to have that designation for someone else, and Sherry Matlock has agreed to do that, and just looking for a motion and her appointment as the district homeless coordinator.
Okay, so is there a motion to approve Sherry Matlock as the district's homeless coordinator?
Make a motion to approve Sherry Matlock as the district's homeless coordinator.
Okay, we have a motion by Board Member Bickle,
Second.
second by Board Member Lang. Any discussion?
I'm not just going back to the reason behind that is we feel like the counselors in schools, maybe it makes sense that that's part of their program, and Sherry is the department chair for that counseling department, so she'll be able to coordinate things with all the schools and administration, so I just want to make that note, you probably won't do that, but anyone else would want to.
Thank you, Shannon. Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. Okay, up next, we guess we have a presentation or a talk about the walking school bus. Dean, do you want to take over?
Yes, Nancy and Terry are here that are going to talk about a new program that O'Laughlin just started this year, and I think you've seen some pictures around, and we'll turn it over to you guys and tell us how it's going.
Yes, thank you for letting us come this evening. Once in a while, you find something that's a win-win. First of all, it was a grant. We got money to do this. It cost us nothing. It provides great benefits for our students, and it's fun. So if you find something like this in your desk and you look next door and you're working beside someone that is perfect match to be the director, well, it's a win-win. So our director is Terry Trammell. That was a big, important, key part of this grant, is that you must find someone that is dedicated, calm, doesn't mind walking in the cold or the heat, and loves kids. So, Terry, I'll let you start. I'll let you drive.
There's a lot of benefits to the walking school bus. Got some listed here. Just overall health and well-being of the student. Promotes parental involvement at any time, any day. Parents are more than welcome to come walk with us. They don't have to call ahead or volunteer. If, one morning it works out, hey, I've got time to walk, they're welcome to come.
School board members are invited.
Sarah Rankin walked with us one day already. So, it sets a positive tone for the school day. The kids, a lot of times, groggy in the morning, instead of being all groggy and sleepy and coming in and sitting down at a desk, they're getting a little bit of a workout in the morning. They're walking, they're awake. About halfway through, they start talking with their friends that are there. By the time they're at school, they're chit-chatting and ready to go, so that's good. Walking, it encourages lifelong exercise and promotes attendance and reduces late arrivals. Beyond the physical benefits, it promotes traffic safety, reducing traffic around the schools. Just helps with the students' sense of well-being, making connections. A lot of times in the school, they're in their classroom, they're with their friends there, or their grade level. With the walking school bus, we've got kindergartners through 5th graders. A lot of times we'll have some of our kindergartners might be a little bit slower. Our 5th graders take them by the hand, help walk them along, talk to them, and they're just making connections at different age levels. Who can walk? Students have to register before they can walk. Otherwise, anybody can. It doesn't cost anything. What we do is we have our custodian, with the work of Jim Boyle with the Parks and Recreation, have on the signpost at 16th and Pine, which is corner of Massey Playground, we have a yellow flag that we hang there. I usually get there in the morning about 20 after 7, hang up the flag. Students start arriving, parents stay with the students until we're ready to depart, and then at 7:30 we take that flag down, we start our walk, and then if any parents come late, they know with that flag gone, they're not to drop their kids off, that we've already left. So there's our flag.
We did have a little kindergartner that found that the route was a little long, a little intimidating, so they shortened the route, and you can join midstream and make it a little shorter, walk with your child, encourage them. So it's open for all the ages. We want to make sure that it's a positive, not something that's punitive. It has to be one of those things that's helping build that connection and that sense of school family. It's sponsored, the grant came from PEDNET, which is the coalition to promote pedestrian and bicycling, and making it easier for people to walk and for wheelchairs and public transportation. That's their particular focus. 15 schools in Kansas received grants, and we did get notification that there is availability for one more school in Kansas to start the walking school bus. So if you happen to know of another school that's interested, we would be happy to make those connections for them.
So our staging point, kind of talked about this a little bit before, is Massey Park in the corner there. We meet at the opposite end of Allen Street. Allen Street's kind of a busier street, faster traffic moving by there. That still leaves the 3 sides open for parents to park, get out, walk over with their kids, hang out until we leave. It's a 0.8 mile walk, 20-minute walk to school. That's pretty good pace for some of the little ones. Some days we're a couple minutes behind that, but we do pretty well. Currently, this is little bit outdated. We've got 23 students now that are walking with us. I've got 2 more that are going to be signing up this week. So our numbers are increasing, which is great. Our goal is to have about 60 students. With that, we would need, obviously, more volunteers. Right now, I walk every day, and then I have a daily volunteer. So if anybody's interested in volunteering, we're always open. Let's see.
One of the things is we do not walk in the afternoon. We wanted to make this a very positive start, so we're going to start small. We walk only in the morning to school, and then we'll stop after 6 weeks and then resume when it warms up again in the springtime. And then if we have enough volunteers and it's going smoothly enough, we'll add the afternoon route. But so far, we're off to a great start. Any questions?
Does the route change?
No, the route is set. If there's any students that live along the route, we have one that's like that. As we're coming by, then they come out of their house and join us. So.
Okay, because my house is right on the route.
Is
And I
it?
think it's pretty neat to see those kids. They're pretty happy by the time they hit my house. So you must be doing a very good job of getting them pepped up in the morning.
I've had a lot of positive comments. I think when it first started, people are kind of wondering who's this lady standing on the corner of the playground in the morning. But since then, I've had several people have stopped and commented, and they think it's a really great idea, and it's great for the kids. So that's been good.
And it's fun. So thank you for letting us share.
Wait, I just want to say congratulations to you for obtaining this grant and to both of you for getting this started. I participated one day. It was fun. It was neat. The kids are excited to be doing this. It was a brisk walk. It was great exercise for everyone involved, but it was fun. We have a beautiful city, and to take that trip in the morning, it was just really neat. And so I hope that this takes off because it's a wonderful idea.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item D, the ACT update. Shanna, I think you're taking the lead on this one, is that correct?
Yeah, Marty and I are actually teaming for
We wanted to just share, I know it had been in the paper, so the score, it may not be new information. I think they were embargoed, the ACT scores till August 20th or something like that. So the first display we have here is, I'll go down a little bit, the past 5 years of Hayes High scores, starting with English on the left. You can see how it goes up a little bit. 2010 and then 11, 12, and then it dips down. So as you look at that, I might just let Marty, I learned a little bit about, a lot of times we think of are these junior scores because they take the ACT during their junior year, but actually the final report we get is the graduating class. And you can talk a little bit about that. It's not even their best score, it's their most recent score, correct?
Yeah, it's interesting. When you look at the ACT score, obviously, this is one of the more important tests that students that are bound to four-year universities take. The ACT score, a student can take it any number of times, and there's really no set-out period because the test itself is spaced long enough that no student is at an advantage if they take it every time since they're 7th graders. Most of our students will take during their junior year. We encourage a test by the April year. In June during summer school, we have an ACT prep class that we have 4 teachers teach. We changed the instructional approach to that this last year, and it will be very interesting to see if that was the right direction to go. We feel that it is. We learned a lot from a called Power Prep out of Manhattan. We learned a lot from the presentation she did to about 60 kids last February, and we had our teachers set in and take that class along with the kids. Not one kid left that night. So at least for engagement, we absolutely felt we did the right thing, and there's a lot to learn about the ACT. Generally, in the ACT this year, if you want to know what our composite was based on the best score of the students, it was 22.2. Our composite taking the last score that the kids took. Not all the time do kids improve every test, especially students who might have a 26 or a 29 or a 30. Those students are many times driven to get that 32, 34, 30, 33, and it is very, very difficult to go up a skill score when you get to that point in a very, very competitive, difficult test. We found that speed is very, very important in the ACT. We do quite well in a couple of the subtests. Science is a bear. Science is as much a speed test as it is science, and actually it's less about content and more about interpretation and process and looking at data and seeing what it means. It's a real challenge for our kids. So the English test scores, Shannon and I have visited about this several times, but our English score, that subtest score, is the one that appears to bite us the hardest. And that has to do with, it shouldn't be a surprise to us as a district, we have really emphasized for the last decade reading and math. Consistently, our highest scores are reading and math. We do need to somehow, we've got to allocate time to become better writers in that area too. So it's recognition of grammar, appropriately written or inappropriate written phrases, definitions of words, and those things that is tested in the English. And quite honestly, we have, honestly as a district, re-emphasized interpretation of what's being read, not necessarily how it's being written. And so we really have to throw that into our portfolio as well.
I think as we look at not just the content, some of the new college and career ready standards and next generation changing, it's more the instruction of how it is, not things taught in isolation like with the written and the mechanics, but actually have kids doing more writing, examining their own writing, those types of things. And it looks like here, when you look at this graph, English was down some, reading actually went up 0.1, and then math 0.4, science did drop 0.4, and then just a small decrease in our overall composite. Now, the next page here then compares where those were. So that was just Hayes High in the last 5 years. This takes a look at the last 5 years, our local scores compared to the state. We always want to compare ourselves to the state and the state averages. One thing to keep in mind, obviously, this is trend. We want to look at the overall trends. And this past year, I was thinking more about this. That senior class was the group that's kind of been caught between the No Child Left Behind, the old standards, and our alignment with the college and career ready standards. And the ACT, over half of the writers of the Common Core were had an ACT background, and that makes sense because that was the college half. When we say those standards are to prepare kids to be college ready and career ready, they had people on the panel representing, obviously, the ACT. So hopefully, as we get stronger as our teachers and we move some professional learning with those college and career ready standards, they'll align nicely with ACT, and we'll look at improved scores. But you can see another thing is the first column there is total participation. We had a high participation rate as a district versus the overall state average of participants. And you know, when you average things, a few low scores can really bring down even some of those high scores. But that's where when Marty's talking about the English, we're below the state average in English by 0.3. That's where we need to focus and look at what's happening in the instruction. Overall, math also below the state average some, and then you can see reading not quite as far below, and then science, even though it dropped when we compare the Hayes High scores, it actually is the same as the state average, and then the overall composite was just a 10th. I did include the 5-year trends for the national average, and we are above the national scores, obviously, but it's important to us to be competitive in the state as well. And so those are some things I know Marty has designed into their master's schedule. Last year, math department met, so this is their second year that they've had time to collaborate. And part of the purpose of that is it was a focus for the district for math. They also had new materials, and so it made sense. This year, he and Tom and Chris were able as an administrative team to create that common time for science, and they're looking at the next generation standards and their course alignment. We talked today about we really need to get the English department together as well. That collaboration time is just so important, and that's one of the areas we know we've fallen behind and haven't been able to give teachers the time to dig into those standards like some other districts.
Just a few other points. We made some points we wanted to share with you. Just in addition to the bottom line is if finances are limited and our time is limited, we need to find a way to do within the school day and the contract time more with what we have. And we feel like the common plan time has been the best answer. There will come a point in time where we can't do any more departments because it'll crash our master schedule. But we do have plans for next year to enter ELA, so they have common plans and do common assessments and really get into the curriculum. I do feel that with the improvements in the infrastructure for technology and looking at a new lease down the road, technology can be an asset, not a frustration, as we experienced last year. It's not the reason our scores are what they were, but it did take away a ton of instructional time, and I know not only in our building, but the other buildings in the district as well. So we look forward to improvement there. Again, the ACT test shouldn't be taken by every student, and it's not unusual for Hayes High to have a little bit higher participation rate because we have a university locally. I will tell you, in towns that have community colleges, it isn't as high because they don't have to take the ACT. They can take a test called the ASSET, which is free, which will still allow them admittance regardless of their score. So part of that is counseling on our part that we need to improve on, but ultimately it really does come down to a quality written curriculum that's taught in a rigorous fashion and taught effectively and learned by students so they can demonstrate those things that they have learned. So again, it goes back to having a curriculum that we can identify that's aligned to whatever assessment the kids are going to have to demonstrate that knowledge in, teaching it as effectively as we can, and making sure the students learn it. And if they didn't, finding ways to reteach that. And I go back to our GPS system that we're using in our school. I think it's a great opportunity for reteaching and relearning for kids too. So we have some things in the works, and time will tell if we're heading in the right direction.
And we talked about including making sure we have that vertical alignment, the middle school involved, maybe the 8th grade teachers come when they have the individual come from Manhattan, that power prep, so they know what to expect, because it is the end goal, and we, K-12, need to have that as a focus. And I know even with these results, Marty will meet with department chairs, and their counselors will talk to all staff at gold meetings, so we all own this, because writing and reading is across the curriculum, moving back towards that as a focus as well. So I think we have some things in the place because this is important and we want to stay competitive. I know when Bryce mentioned that our schools are important, it's not just facility-wise, but academically as well. So it is something that we'll continue to look at and study and do what we need to help our staff along.
Do you foresee anything taking the place of the ACT stuff going forward? Just I've seen a lot of stuff here even over the past year where they said a lot of universities are not really placing the merit that they once did on ACT, SAT, things like that.
I think some of the universities have gone to a portfolio of sorts. The more selective universities have done that and will continue to do that. For the masses, right now, it's very important that we help kids do well on the ACT and SAT. It really doesn't benefit us as a school other than to say we're preparing them to do well on that, but it's very, very important to be competitive. For several years, I served on the Robert Byrd Scholarship Committee, and we came in with piles of scholarship applications like this. What do? They're our state's best. How do you separate them? And we went through no 33s, you put them aside. Even with the portfolio, it's very important for our students to be competitive on this norm reference test. I certainly do see that more, Lance, but it's a consistent norm to measure. It's taken on the same day under the same conditions nationwide. It's just that level playing field that you judge people on.
And I think actually there was talk that it would be the national assessment or could be, that college and career, but there's a cost to it. We don't pay for it, obviously, the students do. And like Marty and I talked, what do we do to prepare our students? Well, there are some earlier assessments that align with this, but they're very expensive. When we talk about our budget, and we don't have the money in the funds for some of the instructional assessment things we'd like to do. But, if we had earlier indicators, then we could see if kids will be on track and make adjustments accordingly. So those are just things we talk about.
We could talk a long time about this, but just one more thing. I think that in-service, I think that we absolutely have got to find a way to budget in-service in, and if we can't do it at the district level, just creatively, principals, we're going to have to find a way to do it. The Pepsi money that we talked about, when we get that, to be honest with you, I'm trying to be as frugal as I can so we can get in-service for our teachers. I'm not so certain that's where it really should come from, but if that's what's necessary, we're going to do that. We had many teachers attend some good in-service this summer, and I'm optimistic that we're going to get more and more interested. We've got to develop our leaders. When you have a lot of turnover, we've had more turnover in the last couple of years than Hayes High normally has. We have to develop that knowledgeable staff member again so they can lead the youngsters that we're hiring from time to time. So
Right.
in-service is very, very important.
Getting the information and then that consistent collaboration of working through it, not just the one time of learning, but then bringing it back and having that scheduled time. And that happens at the elementary as well. We cut specials, but that's how we allow time for those grade level teachers to collaborate and prepare and work as professionals and brainstorm and look at the data. And so we really need to look at building some of that collaboration, that ongoing professional development into the calendar. And I know that's one of the committees we'll look at with negotiations is just professional learning and development calendar and what we can do differently. Not harder, our teachers, everyone's working hard. It's just being smarter about it and using the resources we have, so.
You had mentioned the GPS system. That was put into place last year?
Yes, sir.
Is
This
that
is our
right?
second year.
And you feel that's really helping students?
Well, we had fewer failures, we had fewer missed homework assignments, we had fewer detentions for missed homework assignments, fewer office ISSs for not showing for our detentions after, and we saw GPAs go up a little bit. It's not necessarily cause and effect because we did a lot of different things last year, James, but we really do feel, here's what we really like about GPS. There's several things. Number one is it benefits all students. Many of the programs we develop are developed for students who struggle in school. We need to help develop students who don't struggle in school too. We need to give them the opportunity to do well and get smarter even if they're already smart. We are really committed to challenging all the students and giving those kids an opportunity. We want kids involved in athletics and activities, and we send them on the bus to Liberal for a music competition and a 3.5-hour bus drive, and they're going to miss school. Well, how do they get the instruction? If a student is going to miss period 3 and 4 on Maroon Day, but they have a G2 GPS and there's an honors chemistry that hour, all they have to do is go to that teacher and say, can I come in during that time? We have a pass system made up, and they don't miss the instruction. We think it's just very, very valuable. If we were in an urban area and we were driving 20 miles, probably not as necessary. It is absolutely essential we find time in the school day for kids to get extra help from teachers. And we've shortened the length of the seminar, but we have actually increased access to teachers. It's very encouraging. It's not perfect, but it's very encouraging.
Anything else?
Anybody else? Questions?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Thank you, Mrs. Tinker.
Thank you, Mark.
We'll wait until Shanna gets back to her seat. All right, we'll move on to item E, Board Policy Review Calendar. Shanna, do you want to take over?
We will be visiting, actually, Wednesday is our first building administrative meeting where we will, I think at the work session, we talked about instead of committees, the administrative team will review, we're going to start with the student section, we deal with that a lot, so we prioritized and put in order that we feel makes sense, and so at our monthly meetings, the principals will come with their notes marked up, and then we will go over it as an administrative team and bring back to you where we see discrepancies. If we practice it one way, but policy says this way, or policy says this, and we're not doing that. So we will dig through that. Every administrator has a copy and the agenda. So throughout this year, we will tackle that and then bring back at work sessions and board meetings and discrepancies. If there's ever an issue you want us to look at, just let us know. We'll continue to update you.
Thank you.
Okay, item action F, the authorization of the board president and vice president to sign the revised Clayton Holdings Exhibit D lease to purchase agreement forms. Dean, you want to provide a little background on that?
Well, we've always had these things under the consent agenda, but since we changed board president, vice president, those things, we need to make that appointment or approval for James and Marty to be the signatory parties for Clayton Holdings. That's the first step, and then the next one, we need to approve the actual bill, so.
Okay, so do I hear any motions to authorize the board president and vice president to sign the revised Clayton Holdings Exhibit D lease to purchase agreement forms?
Make a motion to authorize the board president and vice president to sign the revised Clayton Holdings Exhibit D lease to purchase agreement forms.
Okay, we have a motion by board member Bickle,
Second.
second by board member Lang. Any discussion?
Both F and G.
Do we want to group them together?
This just said D, that's the only one it said.
Okay. Do you want to amend?
To amend to include the authorization to make the payment.
Okay.
If you fall over as included under G.
Okay. We have a motion from board member Schwartz to amend and group both F and G to make payment.
I'll second.
Second by board member Bickle. Any discussion on the amendment?
So the only thing that's changing here is the names. This is how this has been done in the past? Okay.
Okay. Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. Okay. Now we'll get back to the original motion with the amendment. All right, we had a motion by board member Bickle and a second by board member Lang. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. On to H, approval of the revised work session schedule. I'll turn it back over to Superintendent Cat.
We had had you approve the board meeting schedule for work sessions and board meetings, and just wanted to review. We did meet at Hayes Middle School, the last work session. The next work session is scheduled for September 29th. That will be here because of the Learning Center graduation is at 6 o'clock that evening here. So rather than extend the meeting, we just scheduled one work session every month, and we'll get through all the buildings easily. But so the 29th is here, and then we will go to Lincoln on October 20th and meet in the gym there. And the next one then is at Wilson in November, and so on. So what we're asking is just approve this so it's published and everyone knows where our work sessions will be, so.
All right, is there a motion to approve the revised work session schedule?
I make a motion to approve the revised work session schedule.
Okay, we have a motion by board member Rankin. Any seconds?
Second.
Second by board member Lang. Any discussion? I had one question, Dean. I believe we have another work session scheduled in March. Is that correct? There's two work sessions in March?
And the other one will be here, and
again?
that is, I believe the other graduation for the Learning Center.
Okay.
So we tried to work around those where there wouldn't be a conflict and go here and then have to run to another building, so, yeah. Yes,
Okay.
there is one there.
Any other discussion? Okay, I'll ask for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. On to item 10, discussion by board members and agenda requests. Got any?
Patron correspondence. The one I have, which I think, Tracy, are you still coming along on the sports stuff?
Yes, we are. It's taking a little bit of time to gather the information, but yes, the high school's working on it, and we are looking at it. Yep. I think we have that on our agenda in October.
Okay.
Any
I
other
just-
board members?
Well, I had a question. When will we be hearing from, about the technology plan for the devices? About the survey and whether we're going to pursue one-to-one?
They and I, gosh, Shannon, do you remember? I don't remember what the date is for the technology committee meeting, the big
September
committee.
24th. September 24th.
Okay, so they're meeting to start that process and get that going, and Brian's been working on that part about looking at different devices, but we will start having those presentations and gather that information and determine what we need to do sooner than later, so.
Okay. So you think we'll hear something by October,
Yes.
shortly
Oh,
after
yeah.
that meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Where are we at enrollment now? Are we pretty steady? No more new enrollments or people leaving?
Pretty steady. I'll look at the principals and see if you lost or gained anybody today, or this.
We did enroll one today.
You did.
You're
So,
kidding.
I think we are sitting pretty good. A lot of it depends, like always, on the virtual school and the learning center, how those numbers come in. But overall, I think, I know Craig's numbers are up over 50. I think Marty's are just about the same, or
You're right
maybe.
about the same.
Yeah. And everyone else, I think, is fairly close or up some. So I think we're going to meet our projections, even, I hate to say it, and I might jinx myself, but I think we'll even meet our high estimate on our projections. So feeling pretty good right now, but it's going to depend on how the virtual school comes in actually. So, and they were, I don't want to say on track. Anita's, they're down a little bit from where they were at this time last year, but I know they're working on it hard, but I feel pretty confident we'll be fine.
Because head count day is the 20th, is that right?
Monday.
Monday?
22nd.
22nd.
So that'll be the day we run everything and have a pretty good picture there. And actually, you have this year, the 22nd to October 6th, so we are not looking too bad, though. I'm excited, actually, about it.
Still enrolling though.
Do what?
Yeah, we're still enrolling.
Yes, we are.
Any other board members have requests or discussion items? Okay, I don't think we need an executive session.
I
Didn't have any. Okay. All right, well, I guess meeting's adjourned.